Hi, Kadia. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Kadia, it's been so long.
Kadia, I love this piece. As you know, I slacked you right after. I was jealous it wasn't an audio. And so now finally it is. You're here. Explain when you learned that men, and particularly black men, were kind of hot for Donald Trump.
So it's been a thing since the 80s or 90s. I just feel like people kind of forgot that. And I guess setting out to do the piece, I've always, had in the back of my head like you're sadly mistaken if you think that he is not appealing to those people who featured him in his rap songs many years ago. I just thought it was something that never really was talked about during his last 4 years as presidency. And, just wanted to explore that. But it never changed from the 80s. He's always been a figure in that community.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this started right with you saying, like, I think I can get an interview with Trump. And in a way, for me, like, the beginning of this story was you saying, I think I have a sort of pitch to the Trump campaign to talk to him. And it ended with your saying, well, the interview was like interesting, but not that newsy. But oh my God, this was the most insane reporting experience. And I wonder if you could just like kind of walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it started with this other story I had done about Black outreach. I was just trying to get a story about Black outreach, and they kind of like just dodged me or whatever. So from then, the campaign kind of was like, like anything you need, we'll help you out or whatever. And I came back to Ben, and Ben kind of was like, well, you should probably ask him for an interview. And I was like, you know what? I think I could. And I think we should probably make this pitch about me, understanding Donald Trump, working at Dooney and Burke back in the day in the early 90s.
Explain what Dooney Burke is.
Dooney and Burke is a handbag store, and I used to work in their retail shop. They had one on Madison Avenue, and the other one was on the second floor of Trump Tower on 57th. And whatever, it was just like a bunch of, I mean, it still exists, to be honest, but it was a high-end handbag store. A lot of tourists would come in specifically for Trump Tower, but also like come into the store. This is a long time ago. Like we used to smoke cigarettes in the back of the store at that point. But you would always see Donald Trump. That was never like a big deal. You would also see him in clubs if you were, cute enough to get into those like fancy clubs with rappers. You would see him in there. It was like not a big deal.
Which, Kadia, you were cute enough to get into those fancy
Well,
clubs with
yes.
rappers, obviously, I presume. Well, so you had this really interesting vantage point to Donald Trump, not as a reporter, but as someone kind of in the orbit, a fly on the wall, or like a Nora Ephron, like wallflower at the orgy, kind of. Is that right?
Yeah. And to your point, I just never understood why people never looked at like how rappers or people from New York never talk shit about him, or they just was like, oh, wow. Even Russell Simmons, I remember clearly him saying like, that's my man. I can't believe he's president or he's running for president, but like, yeah, that's Donald. He's cool. So I feel like people forgot about that Donald Trump.
I don't think they just forgot about it. I think there's this kind of characterization of Trump in the tabloid culture and his, attacks on the Central Park Five as him being intensely racist and understood as that, when in fact you're saying he was part of the fabric of the community.
Very much part of the fabric of the community. And on that, he talks about his op-ed during the Central Park Five time, and he talks about, well, everyone thought they were guilty at that point, and he was kind of just, it appears he was just kind of going with the phrase, not, defending him or whatever. But it was a different time. That really didn't become a thing until they were found not guilty. And then he was president, or at least running for president at the time.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, look at you, you racist. Like, why'd you do that?
So bring it back to this moment when Ben says you came to him and were like, oh, I think I get an interview. You thought this was a bit of a good news story for Trump that no one was telling, his resonance in this community.
Well, certainly, pay attention if you think that this group of people, Donald Trump appealed to a big group of people who voted for him, who thought they were underserved and not looked after or ignored, right? Guess what? A lot of people in the Black community feel the same way. So, and because he has had this reputation, I wanted to dispel this myth that Black people wouldn't be attractive to him, as stories or polling had showed that he was, gaining Black support, especially among Black men, which brings me to my story because I interview a bunch of Black men.
Yeah, so tell the story. Like basically, you set out to get an interview with Donald Trump. How does that work? Is
Yeah.
that a normal process of trying to get an interview?
No, not at all. So I always felt like they were going to give it to me. I know people were probably skeptical about that, but I go out and I'm like, so let me talk to Trump about his black outreach. And the campaign kind of said, well, yeah, like maybe we'll think about it. Well, why don't you just, first of all, you should probably talk to some people that he knew or he knows from that era. And they were all New York celebrities, like the first person I talked to was Darryl Strawberry, who was an iconic Met player, which Trump and Darryl Strawberry, like who puts those two together? But I set out to put those two together. These are some people who weren't very political, but had this appreciation for Donald Trump and wanted to talk about it.
And so you're doing, I mean, you're getting all these kind of Trump surrogates in sports world. And this kind of kinship emerges with these black athletes who feel like Donald Trump represents them in some way. And I think Mike Tyson summed it up to you best in your written reporting. We actually have an audio clip of your conversation with him.
If I never saw Donald Trump and didn't know he was white, I would think that he was black the way they were treating him in the papers and in the press.
I would think he were black the way they were treating him. Is that a common thread? Like, does this community become like strange bedfellows with Donald Trump because they have kind of common cause of a fight against institutions like the press or the criminal justice system?
Yeah, so, as I'm interviewing these people, I'm also going to like black conservative events and talking to just everyday workers or small business owners who are actually echoing this sentiment. So I didn't feel like they were so far off. Now, about the criminal background thing. So, to be clear, I have never heard a black man say, oh, I identify with him because he's a criminal.
No, because he's unfairly prosecuted by the criminal justice system.
Because he says he's unfairly prosecuted by the criminal justice system. And yes, many black men feel like they have also been shafted by the criminal justice system, whether they couldn't afford a proper attorney or they just felt unfairly treated. So yeah, there's a lot of identity there. It does not resonate well when the white man running for president says that, but when you hear it from other black men, I imagine it's probably more believable.
You spoke to my childhood hero, former New York Giants linebacker Lawrence Taylor, number 56, and he said this.
He gonna speak his mind. He doesn't care how it comes out. He's not derogatory, but I mean he is. I like him. He's a man's man. Yeah.
So what is he talking about? The sort of man's man line really stuck with me. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think, in the black community, in the Hispanic community, people call it machismo or, just showing strength. And that is something that kind of resonates in the black community, whether you're Lawrence Taylor and you make a lot of money or you're just, a young dude in the hood. If you have nothing, at the very least, you have like strength. You can like protect your family. It is something that I often hear a lot. And when I talk to a lot of people on the ground, black men on the ground, their sentiment was that, the Democratic Party has really bolstered black women because, Democrats famously say that black women saved the elections or, voted Joe Biden in. And they feel that they have been kind of sidelined by that. And I remember one man telling me, they already don't have respect for us. Now we're losing our women. So this is a common thread in this particular community.
Your reporting journey in this piece culminates with you getting this interview with Donald Trump that you thought you could get and you did get. And you asked him about his appeal with black men. And from what I read in the piece, he replies saying, they see what I've done and they see strength. They want strength, okay? I wish I had, his voice saying that because it probably sounds very different to mine. But talk about what he meant there. They see strength, they want strength. Because strength, like that itself has this kind of masculine quality and sales, like marketing to it, right?
Yeah, it's that bravado I keep saying that appeals to the black community. That is something I think people from that generation feel like it has been either demonized or maybe watered down when we talk about like equal rights. I can't believe I'm saying this, but yes, this is something that men, especially from that era, and are feeling, and also teaching other younger men that this is probably not how it used to be and things should change.
Yeah, just to kind of take this back to the media story that we're thinking about, and the kind of media spectacle that you and I are here in Milwaukee kind of witnessing. You came out of all this reporting, out of this flood of 1980s athletes calling you, and I'm curious here as you see that Trump sell himself through the media. Like, do you see these threads? Do you see this sort of case he's making about gender, about masculinity?
Well, sure, right? We see that when he talks about gender in sports, right? And how a trans woman is not a woman. But also, I mean, since the shooting, right? A lot of what's resonating on the stage right now is talking about him being our bold President Trump, and he has a new mantra: fight, fight, fight. That is something, some might see as a bit aggressive. Can't wait till all this backlash happens in like 5 years from now. But there's a lot of that. There's a lot of hyper masculinity, I think, coming forward. It'll be interesting when I go back to the Hill how this actually reshapes a lot of lawmakers and how they interact with us. But yeah, I do feel like I see it in front and center now.
You sort of, in a way, were set out to write a political story about his appeal in flickering in the polls to broaden his base among black voters. Here, I mean, we've been talking about how there are UFC fighters all over the place. There's a lot of kind of really broad-shouldered guys showing up on that stage, and I am curious if you see is that part of the same push, or are these sort of different elements of his campaign?
I do think so. I mean, didn't we just hear that Hulk Hogan is like introducing him or something? That's insane, right?
Yeah, what is that about?
Masculinity, you know what I mean? Like playing into that. If you think about Dane's telling me which J.D. Vance could get lunch bucket Democrats. What is a lunch bucket Democrats? The guy that goes to the steel mill, like it is romanticizing this bravado, and I think it's going to continue. And just going to be very interesting.
Got all the heroes of my youth here: Hulk Hogan, Lawrence Taylor. I have to revisit my whole political sort of orientation.
You're in the right place there in Milwaukee.
Look at one of his spokespeople, like Stephen Chung. He's a former UFC fighter, right? Like,
It's an incredible career path.
yeah,
You thought you had a weird career, Kadia.
exactly.
Probably prepares you, like working at Dooney and Burke prepares you for reporting on Trump. I think UFC probably prepares you for dealing with the press for him. Do you think he's also appealing? That strength is also appealing to women, because Ben and I were discussing last week's episode the kind of nostalgia, the aesthetic fantasy of this trad wife movement, right? Some people looking for more traditional gender roles, the challenge of finding men that are strong and protective. And The Cut recently had some polling that showed that Trump had about 21%, about a fifth of the vote from Black women aged 18 to 34. Is that something that surprises you, or?
I don't know. So on my, reporting this out, like I said, I was going to a bunch of conservative events. I won't forget a young woman stood up and said that, she felt like she had diminished her man so much that she had to do some real introspective looks inside to regroup. And she stood up in front, it was as a cigar bar, and she stood up and kind of made this testimony. So yeah, I guess this is part of that. It would be some really good reporting to actually hash that out, but I haven't. That kind of stood out to me and matched the story I was doing for that day. But yeah, I would imagine that's probably, I don't know. How do you square that with equal pay and equal rights? I don't know how that happens. And abortion, agency over your own body. I don't know how that squares. I don't know if the country is ready to be that split. It's interesting though. It's worth a thread of reporting, right?
Sounds like Kadia's next assignment.
Yeah, I mean, I think you tapped such a deep vein here. Really, really interesting. And I think it's so, I mean, it is honestly, it's so interesting to think about. I mean, the other amazing stat is that Trump leads particularly far among divorced men, which, kind of makes complete sense. But just can you just close us out here just with like a reality check? Like Trump's going to get destroyed among black voters, isn't it?
Yeah, so to be clear, the Democratic Party still has like 92%, or polling is saying 80 something now, because the assumption is that he's going to gain a bit of black voters. I do not see that. You know what? I am not going to make a call here,
No
but
predictions.
no predictions. Yeah, it would be interesting if that happened, but I would say black people, men and women, are going to overwhelmingly vote Democratic.
Yeah, and a marginal shift can change the election, but just to kind of keep this all in context, though, it does feel like, I don't know, you've just tapped into what's, I think, a really deep long term trend in America, whether or not it plays out in November. So anyway, thank you so much for this arduous reporting project that you of talking to every sports figure that I was obsessed with in the '80s. We're not going to discuss whether I asked you to get anybody's autograph, which would be profoundly unethical.
Oh God, Ben. LTs? Was it LTs?
No comment.
Well, thank you so much, Kadia, for being here.
Thanks, Kadia.
Thank you.